Good evening. Today's date is February 23rd, 2022. We're going to be interviewing Sensei Brad Cosby, a direct student of Hanshi Shintani, and the interview will be conducted by myself, Bruce Perkins, and Neil Prime. To start off, could you please state your name, Sensei Brad?
Brad Cosby.
And what is your martial arts background?
Karate and Shindo.
Okay. What styles have you studied?
I've studied Nippon Karate Do and Shintani Wadokai Karate and Shindo.
Okay. And how many years have you been involved with martial arts?
This is my 56th year.
Okay. And how did you get started in the martial arts?
Well, when I was 11, I was a very introverted kid and wanted something to do. Our family didn't have any extra money, so there was no money to send people to hockey or baseball or anything like that. I had a paper route, and basically I paid for my own way to karate. My mother had phoned an ad in the paper about the karate for me and inquired for the kids class, which was at that time run by Eileen Dennis, who is a well-known martial artist that just recently passed away. At that time, she was part of Sensei Shintani's group, which she later on left. But there was no room in the kids class. So she asked my mom how big I was. And at that time I was fair size. So they put me in the adult class at 11 years old. And just shortly after I started, Eileen Dennis separated. So if I had been in her club, I probably would have went a whole different direction than I did now. So I started and I basically paid for it with my paper route money. At that time, we paid $1 a night and an extra $1 a month association fees and $5 registration fee every year. And that was it. Oh, mind you, the year was 1966. So it was, it was a fair bit, I guess, for the time. But to be taught by somebody like Hanshi Shintani, $1 a night is unbelievable. So anyway, the first times I started there, he wasn't there because I believe he was in Japan. So it was like a month before I actually met him and he came to the club.
What are your personal accomplishments related to the martial arts?
Wow. My personal accomplishments are basically what it turned me into be that I couldn't have been without it. If you look at it, like I said, I was an introverted kid. I wouldn't say anything to anybody. You know, it led me to do things like, well, the physical fitness and to get up in front of people and teach. That is something I could have never done. I captained the Grimsby High School football team in my 4th year, knowing nothing about the sport really. So that was something else that I was able to do. And plus later on in the life to go on to be a doorman was again something else I couldn't have done because I didn't have any people skills. But that's, to me, is my greatest accomplishments, let alone what I've accomplished in the clubs and what I've been able to do with karate through the clubs.
Okay. Sensei Neil?
I was just going to ask Sensei Brad if you wanted to expand on that a little bit before we get into the next questions. Accomplishments within the Shintani Karate Federation, for example.
Oh, my accomplishments in to become a leader in this organization is something else, you know, to have that trust to be one of the original Senate members chosen by Hanshi Shintani was awesome, you know, and to be able to do that and to be able to lay down a foundation for what we did for the Senate, where the Senate is now and how much it's advanced, let alone what we did for the Shindo program with all of us in the Shindo committee. The original was one being Sensei Bruce Perkins, Sensei Lawrence Blakemore, Sensei Jim Atkinson, Sensei Ron Matty, and myself. To lay down that basis for that program was, to me, a real accomplishment. And where it's gone to now and where it's still continuing to go is just unbelievable to see.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when you set a solid foundation, and that's very, very important. What was your actual first encounter with Hanshi Shintani?
Well, that would have been in November of 1966 when he had returned to the club. Prior to that, we were being taught, I'd like to put that in quotation marks, by a black belt, one of his students. And those days, things were so different. Black belts rarely got on the floor, and we're talking just show dance and worked out, let alone people our ranks that are on the floor now. So he came back in November. One thing I can always remember, that black belt that was teaching us never got on the floor. Hanshi Shintani get on the floor and do some amazing exercise, like he was push-ups, many different types of push-ups, fingertips, knuckles, bounce on the knuckles, single knuckle push-ups, stuff like that. But you know one thing about him? He always got on the floor and did them. He didn't ask a student to do anything that he wouldn't do. So that was something that really stuck out in my mind compared to the first month that we had experienced then.
What is your favorite memory of Hanshi Shintani?
Oh, my favorite memory would be, of course, all the times I traveled with him had to be my favorite memory. As there was about 5 or 6 years, we were going like 4 to 6 nights a week out there, traveling with him and the conversations with him. Of course, I was very young and at that time didn't have a full grasp on what I was actually experiencing, that I wish that I had if I had been a little older. I was between the ages of, say, from 15 to 21 when I started traveling with him. So it's like I didn't have a full grasp. You look back and our trips would always be, he would pick me up at 4:30 in the afternoon to travel to Port Dover or Simcoe. And there were an hour to an hour and a half trips, but all the stops we would make and the coffee shops, and probably 2 or 3 stops at least between when we left Grimsby and going to Simcoe. You look even earlier than that, some of my favorite memories were because we lived fairly close, he would pick me up and I would go down there and help him with things around the house. So, and stay for supper and stuff like that. So that was always, those were very fond memories for me. And again, I wish I appreciated them more at that time as I do now.
I want to just take a half step back. When you finally met Hanshi Shintani, what was your impression of Hanshi?
Well, you could see the humbleness, but the presence. There was that presence about him that when he walked on the floor, it was like, ooh, you knew it. But it wasn't in a boastful sort of way. So I guess that was it for me. Just the presence of him coming in there on the floor and looking around, and he would smile and laugh, but he never lost that presence. So it's always that presence of being that he had.
Very interesting.
Neil, are you going to ask your number 9?
How did Hanshi Shintani make you feel as an individual?
Well, he made me feel pretty good, because you look at it, I was at 11 years old, I was nowhere near the quality of the students that were on the floor. Like Grimsby had a reputation as a rough town, and those people that were on the floor with me were athletic and tough and that, but it was never to the point that I was any less. He would spend that time and with me, and and we would go through stuff. He wasn't like I was ever ignored. He always had time to talk to me and help me with stuff, and he just made me grow up in a way. But I mean, not talking in a mean way. It was because I was accepted as an adult in that club, not as a child that I was at that time.
What struck you most about Hanshi Shintani?
I guess what struck me most is that calmness and that ability to go from 0 to 90. Like just to stand there and then stand at the end of watch him punch. It was just like something came over and just switched. And then that light switch went off again, just as quick as it came on.
Sensei Neil, number 12.
What inspired you most about Hanshi Shintani's character?
I guess that character that he had was just that, the kind and humbleness, but be able to do what he did, that just to turn that explosiveness on in a second, and it was always an inspiration to me to try to do the same. So I always tried to pass, and I tried to pass that on too, but it was always that humble kind. But if he looked at, and you could tell when situations happened, when he looked at you, or didn't look at me, but if somebody, if it was a threatening situation, that he went, and he would often tell me from our travels about his life story and his coming to Beansville and the stuff he had to deal with. Even 10 years after the war was over, there was still that prejudice against the Japanese, and he had to fight a lot. And you could tell he probably didn't fight as often as he could have, with a different demeanor. His demeanor was, he would look at you, and probably people would back off before they would actually challenge that. But there were a few that did. And I know he talked about one gentleman that was constantly challenging him in it, and he had to actually get to a physical sense with this man several times. The guy was a powerhouse, and he talked about when, again, the time that this man conducted or got brain cancer and going to the hospital to visit him before he passed away.
Was there a moment where you said, wow, or man, this is the guy? That something Sensei said or Sensei did, was there a moment that stands out?
Oh, I guess that moment would be when we were putting on those 2-man demonstrations at the high schools, and we put on 3 or 4 of them. And he asked my my mother if he could come and take me out of school to put on these demonstrations. And of course, my mother was good with that, and he'd pick me up at the high school, and we would go put on these demonstrations. And before tournaments, we used to put on, people used to do a point demonstration. And so we would do a similar demonstration. And believe it or not, I was a kicker and he was a puncher. But he would stand, I would stand at the end of that punch, and you could just feel the wind from it. And that look, that change of look in his face when he threw that punch. And all I would think is, wow, if that ever hit me, it would smash everything all over my face. So he always stood very still, and he never did hit me.
A little bit of fear is always good. So you had lots of time to train with Hanshi Shintani. Is there a favorite technique that Hanshi showed you? Something that you possibly taught or still teach today?
Oh yeah, there was. And because I did spend so much time teaching or traveling with him, he always taught it to me in steps. So the two that stick out the most are the Junzuki, which was basically my bread and butter all the time I competed. But the way he taught that to me was, and I have a hard time teaching it to people because some of them don't get it. I know. So what he taught me first was the push off with the back foot. You know, you're going from Yakuzuki to Junzuki, and you got to push off. So we practiced that. And usually this was done before class, when we'd show up at class. Because he'd see me in the corner, and I'd be working out. And he'd say to me, Braddy, he says, let's work this technique. I think it'll work well for you. And he always called me that because I think it was sort of a joke with him for the first 4 years, I think, until I was a brown belt. He thought my name was Barry, and I never corrected him. It was actually Charlotte Martin that pointed him out to him one night at the Port Dover Club. He says, why do you call him Barry? And Sensei, that's his name. I said, no, it's not. It's Brad. So I think the Braddy thing was sort of a joke with him. But anyway, so yeah, then he taught me to push. You know, that's all we did for a couple of weeks. Nope. He'd say, just push off that back foot. Not like the fake front kick punch we do. It was just pushing that leg. Boom, getting it. The same push off you use for a front kick, but not actually faking it or doing anything else. It was just getting that leg up to throw it. And then next was actually throwing the technique. And basically it went the same way as you throw a front kick. That hand had to advance at that particular time. And then because of that time I had adapted a fairly strong build. But I was short. So he needed to teach me a way to be able to bridge that gap, to be able to get in close and get on top. And he says, if you run into somebody, it doesn't matter because that's just going to knock them off. So he taught that to me. And that was, like I said, that was my go-to technique that I competed with for many years. And then he taught me the setup. So he would have me throw Orozuki. And I say, Sensei, this is way too far. I'm never going to. He says, it doesn't matter. He says, that's not your scoring technique. That's the get your attention technique to make that person back off or do whatever. So I did. And then he taught me how to, if somebody wasn't backing off, slap that front hand, get it down, go to the head. And a lot of people in those days fought with their hands way down. So it worked well for me. The other technique that he taught me was the way I throw a spinning back kick. And he told me, he don't do this very often because you go to the well too much with it, you know, people are going to catch on. So we'd work the spin, and the spin it came almost like a reverse crescent kick because the knee came up and the leg was tucked in but it was out to the side. It wasn't the way we do the great grading kick. It was totally different. So what it did, instead of hitting the person in the middle of the chest, it would go around the blocking arm and usually hit the ribs or the kidney area and that. So like I said, we spend a couple weeks just working that spin, getting the head snapping around, working the spin and that. Then he finally would get me to throw the technique and that. And then we'd work on the setup. Basically all it was a hand movement from the front to make it look a Rican, but it wasn't even fully extended. Just make that move with the shoulder and get that person going that way and throw. And actually there was a really good picture. We put on a demonstration once at Brock University, and there was a guy that did a lot of pictures in black and white. And I had the whole set and I lost them. I'm sure Sensei Ron or Sensei Dennis still had those pictures, but it was me catching Sensei Peter Chofee with that particular kick. And it was really nice picture. But those would be the most techniques that stand out in my mind that he taught. I don't teach the spinning back kick that much, but the Junzuki I still like to teach, and a lot of people don't get it, and because they want to drag that back foot, they don't want to push off with that back foot. But you know,
for the people who don't know what Junzuki is, it's working off the front hand, and it's trying to generate that same type of power that you would have with a Gyakusuki reverse punch, but with the front hand. Yeah.
So basically pushing that back leg is changing your backhand to your front hand. That's what it is. So, and yeah, that's again, we spent a lot of time on that, and was basically my go-to technique for a lot of years when I competed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those would be my two techniques that I remember most him teaching me.
Is there one thing about Hanshi Shintani that you think he should be remembered for?
I think what he should be remembered for, and again, is that humbleness, kindness, and explosiveness. That's what makes our style unique, and that's got to be carried on. But that explosive techniques that we show, and the supplement, what we call Shintani katas, the explosiveness, and then those katas are unlike any other. And that style that we do, even the Wado katas, that's unique to us, that's unique to him, and that comes way back from Nippon Karate Do when he taught that. It's very interesting. In my Shodan certificate here, because I was looking at it the other day, and Bob Graham asked me to send him, Sensei Bob Graham asked me to send him a picture of the certificate. So I took the picture of the certificate, and then I noticed that Oniri Otsuka, Sensei Oniri Otsuka is on there, but there's no mention of Wado. It says Oniri Otsuka, World President. Masaru Shintani, North American President, and Takeshi Yoshiguro, Vice President. But it says All Canada Karate Do. There is no mention of Wado on there at all, even though Otsuka's name appears on there.
We'll have to check our history books with the dates to find out when Hanshi Shintani was actually given reign to become the president of Wado in North America. That might have been predating that time.
Yeah, I think so, because you look at the date on that certificate. I was great at the Shodan on June 11th, 1972. So it was obviously before that time that he got that.
I'll have to check mine and see what it says.
Yeah. What, Sensei Brad, what would you like to say to the student that has never had the opportunity to meet Hanshi Shintani?
I'd just like to say they missed a whole lot. And because, and it's hard to get that across, and I know that, but the explosiveness that was displayed and that humble and kindness, like you look at it now and I see the celebration that some of these students do, and I just look at it and I go, wow, there's nothing like that he would do. He always felt that you bow and you leave and you accept that win, but not with a big celebration. You know, just go on to the next match. And I think a lot of them, what I'm seeing now, they're caught in the moment of the win. They don't see that you got that whole tournament to go. I remember Sensei Lou telling me that he was in a tournament once and Sensei walking up to him and saying, Sensei Lou had just won the whole tournament. And Sensei Shintani walking up to him said, what are you smiling about, Lou? Lou said, well, I just won everything, Sensei. I won the whole tournament. And he said, yeah, but did you learn anything? But I think that's it. You know, people take now this tournaments and competition to the point where the win means more than the actual competition, you know, the camaraderie and all that. I think if that's what that's what I would say. Why is it such a big deal over the competitions? I agree. I enjoyed competing all the time I competed, you know, and it was a lot of fun. But that's all it was. When it comes down to it, the reality of a lot of tournament fighting is not the reality of a real fight. I think we were close to that. And some of us still practice in that way, that the realism that Hanshi Shintani taught in his karate was, and it was tested and proved by him and by some of his students, some of us that have had to defend ourselves in a real situation. I think that's what I'd say to them, you know, long as you're confident in what you're doing, long as you're confident in the karate you're practicing, that it would actually save your life. I remember him telling me, and this was back when I first started, or about him and Sensei Ishiguro sparring in his backyard. That's what they always said. He always said to Ishiguro before they sparred, be prepared to defend your life. And probably in Japanese, which I imagine it was, but that was what they always started with.
This might be a redundant question after what you just said, but can you describe Hanshi Shintani in one sentence?
Humble, kind, and explosive.
Yeah, it's I guess it would be hard to narrow it down. There was so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to say about Hanshi Shintani that we have not covered? Anything that you'd like to share?
You know, spent so much time with him, and I just hope that the students realize how unique the karate that he taught. I know it's hard not to know when you've never trained with him. You've never seen that look. You've never experienced that explosiveness and his teachings and his philosophy, and that I know we try to pass that on the best we can. I don't know if we're doing that great of a job, but we
I
try.
think you are.
We try, and I just hope that this continues just the way it is, and we don't get sidetracked somewhere and we lose that. We lose that uniqueness that is Shintani karate.
One final question. Do you have any closing comments or thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, there is. And I did a lot of thinking about this one, Sensei. I think when we're young, we sort of go through life and we try to do our best, but along the way, people, and we don't think about it, we don't make the best decisions emotionally, hurting people, and physically maybe hurting people, and morally not doing completely the right thing. I mean, we got to start when we're younger, and I fall into that category. When I was younger, and I have a lot of regrets for what I've done in the past, as far as that goes. But I try to forgive myself. And you look at Sensei Shintani, I remember traveling with him, and at that time, we had a lot of people that were always out to do him wrong. And I remember him saying to me, every time this happened, he would look at me when we were traveling. He says, "Man, Brad," he says, "I can't let that happen again." He says, "I got to be more careful." But 6 months later, a year later, somebody would do it to him again. So you look at it and go, he'd say it again. But is being that trusting a fault? I don't think so. I think it's a virtue to be that trusting of people and trust them to do the right things. And we should all try to do the right things.
Well, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule today to share your thoughts and memories of Hanshi Shintani. He truly was a unique person, the founder of the style that we practice today in the Shintani Wadokai Karate Federation. And, you know, if we didn't have people like you that are willing to share your stories, then his legacy would end very abruptly. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much.
Again, one more thing to say.
Absolutely.
Okay. As far as young people that never knew Sensei, you need to spend time with the people that trained with him and talk to them. I mean, not only on the dojo floor, he was always a big believer in going out after, and that to me is real mentorship. And you need to spend the time to talk to the people that trained with him in that way. You know, talk to them on the floor, train with them, get their opinions, ask them questions, and spend some time after. Go for a coffee, a beer, whatever your choice is, and get to know them. That, again, is mentorship to me, not anything else. Okay, I'm done now.
Well, Sensei Brad, I would like to thank you as well for taking the time to share your
Thank you.
thoughts. And I've always had the utmost respect for you, and I consider you one of my closest friends in this organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Good luck with the rest of them.
This was the very, very first interview that is being conducted by the Legacy Committee in the Shintani Watakai Karate Federation. I think other than Sensei Lou Ronkin, you are the senior most student in the Shintani Karate Federation. We still count Sensei Lou because we still do get him out on the floor every once in a while. And you know, these days it's more watching and critiquing, but it's still a pleasure.
Yeah.
But there's many more interviews to come. So we're looking forward to going through and meeting all kinds of people. And I hope we're providing good value for the students in the Shintani Karate Federation and everywhere, just to understand where we came from and how we got to where we are today.
Yep. That's great. Really appreciate the chance to express myself, guys. I really do.
All right. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.